Why are so many 35s bigger than 40? For my last 3 Japan trips, I kept bringing both. So I tested 3 40s against 4 35s to figure out why. Turns out one of these 35s shoots like a 40, one of these 40s shoots closer to a 50. No wonder I couldn't decide. Lens design's about compromise, just like travel and family. It's the weight we're willing to carry. Hello, I'm Jack, this is Bokeh Therapy, and I've just booked my next Japan trip. I'm starting the packing prep early. Today it's 35 versus 40, deciding which prime works best in the 5 most common travel settings. This does include landscapes, which I know nothing about. I am finally visiting Mount Fuji, so I called my friend Sam, one of the best landscape and adventure photographers I know.
Spent some time hiding in a cave. Mixing genres makes you better at everything. The best photos often follow storms. Let's hike to the valley over. We'll get there in 6 hours, and what we see is what we see.
To test all this gear, I'm using Craft's new 13-liter Lightning Rider Sling version 2. I asked to try a pre-production version of this bag. There are no sponsors for this video, and the first travel setting is what to do when you land. After a late night hotel check-in, a few snaps and a bite to eat. This is TT Artisan's 40mm f2 on the ZF versus Sony's 35G Master on the Z8 with a Viltrox E to Z autofocus adapter. The difference in the two fields of view is subtle. None of these images were cropped. Every shot I wanted to take on this 35, I could also get on the 40. Which do I prefer? A wider lens tends to be better for layering. Finding extra elements to add to my scene is a great way to get to know your new home base, even though this 35 isn't that wide. It actually looks closer to the 40, but it is too big. Do I really need f1.4, that brighter aperture, for travel? Even at night, this Nikon 35 1.8S works perfectly fine, even though there's less separation than a G Master. Interesting, it does look a little wider than a G Master. But on the first night to get to know the nearby neighborhood, I want more things in focus. Compared to the 40mm, the 35 1.8S is more cumbersome, not quite the perfect travel size. But why are so many 35s bigger than 40? Lens designers love lenses that sit close to the sensor, and it doesn't get much closer than 40. Full frame sensors measure 43-ish millimeters diagonally, so on 40mm lenses there's less distance for light to travel, a distortion-free image circle. It's a simple optical formula with fewer elements. You can see this on the Nikon 40, just 6 elements in 4 groups, including a rear element that sits flush all the way to the back of the lens. Nikon's 35 in contrast has 11 elements. Its rear element is recessed far inside the back of the lens because 35 needs more room and glass than 40 to widen the view, correct the distortion. So how did Sony's 35 close the distance? My first time back to Japan after becoming a dad was a solo work trip to Kyoto. Leaving my daily dad duties behind for the first time in a long time, I had much less to carry. When it came to 35 versus 40, I chose the heavier 35. Who knows when I'd make it back again? Even though it let me capture more of these scenes, without family, every moment felt stolen, a little empty. The second travel use case, it's day 2, you're ramping up to venture out into the city, finding the right buses and trains to catch. Commuting is the perfect opportunity for street photography, and this time, the two setups are closer to a fair fight. I have a much smaller 35, the 35 f2 AFD on my Nikon DF, and for the 40, the comparatively big 20mm 1.4 Pro on the OM3. If your street photography is a bit more removed from the action, commuters, let's say on the other side of the street, the 40mm is better. It's a little easier to arrange the figures in the distance when they're bigger on the screen and through the EVF. I am looking for environmental portraiture, harsh shadows, and how the skyscrapers bend the light for us to interact with. But what about shooting from the hip? The 35 still works, I just had to adjust the working distance a little, but for this style of shooting, I think 40 is too tight. Or maybe not this OM20, I do remember Nikon's 40 being a little too tight. I obsess over lens choices and photography tips in my weekly bokeh therapy newsletter. Is 35 my more natural perspective?
With this idea of 35 and 40 millimeter in mind as being this normal perspective, that's, I think, part of why it's so popular, right? It's almost like this do everything lens. This connotation as being the normal perspective, the way we see the world. To me, and I guess I was going to ask you if you feel this way, does it feel like the way you see the world? Does it feel like a natural perspective?
What's in focus for any one of us at any one time is very different. 28 feels like hand-to-hand combat. You can like right in the thick of it. 35 and 40, that feels very, very natural. I think my default perspective is closer to 50 than it is to 35. The peripheral vision kind of just gets blurred out. I'm looking for 50.
That's exactly what I was going to get into and kind of why I think this is so fascinating. It feels more like I do see everything forward, essentially, right? You're looking at almost everything in front of you, and something closer to 15 millimeters has always felt like, well, that's how I'm experiencing the world, right? Because it's all there, and if I redirect my focus, it's already there for me to see it. Now, it's not how I shoot all the time, because I don't want to try to tell narratives with everything in front of me. It dilutes the idea of the narrative in 9 out of 10 scenarios. Still, even 35, 40 still feels tight to me most of the time.
When it comes to form factor, this definitely is not the smallest 40mm equivalent for the OM3. That would go to the 20mm 1.7 Pancake from Panasonic, an even smaller combo, but in some ways, this was a test of how much I like the 40. If it's just because it's convenient, changing my typical experience shooting the 40 with a bigger 40 equivalent will make the difference, and maybe it did. It was a tiny bit more inconvenient. I didn't like shooting it as much as the 35. Granted, this is the smallest 35 I own. It's tiny. Even on a full-frame DSLR. To test all of these 35 and 40mm lenses on a real day in a life photo walk, I had to go back and forth from work, swapping out different 2-camera combinations. My old Pilot 10-liter sling simply wasn't big enough, so here comes the new Craft Lightning Rider 13-liter sling. It holds my 14-inch MacBook Pro and 2 cameras. The optional camera insert is plush. It protects the gear very nicely. My Z8, ZF, DF, OM3, it all fit as long as it was 2 cameras at a time. I use the front zip compartment for my umbrella and accessories. There's also MOLLE attachment points for pouches at the front, not to mention all of these places to attach hooks or the Peak Design capture clip if you use it. I really like the stabilizer strap for holding the bag in place. It is designed for motorbike riders, but it's very handy for low angle street photography. A bag that stays in place is also a must for the third travel use case, tourist trap landmarks, the most famous and most crowded locations at your destination. And in Japan, it tends to be temples and shrines. In my boring hometown, I'm using this Ferris wheel as a stand-in for scale. I've also scaled down the size of the 35. This is the 17mm 1.8 on the OM3 versus the TD Artisan 40mm f2 on the ZF. These two setups are surprisingly not that different in size. Yes, the full-frame ZF is heavier, but this is as close as I got in making 35 and 40 feel similar in handling, so it's an even playing field. The 35 can fit the whole view in frame in this case, whereas on the 40, I had to take 1 to 2 steps back, but it's not a bad thing creatively. The 40 forced me to focus on a specific part of the monument here, a bit of foreground texture there. It was a nice result in camera. For some of you, this will be too tight. Both the lens and the feeling at these tourist trap sites, you'll want more peace and quiet. On my second Japan trip as a dad, we stayed all together in the heart of Tokyo. Prams and diapers made packing light that much harder, so the 40 was the daily choice instead of 35. But it wasn't wide enough for family shots and tiny cafes, not tight enough to catch the action further away. Was I always missing out on something? Travel use case 4 is landscapes. Definitely not my forte. As a street shooter, I could transition to landscape.
Mixing genres makes you better at everything. In street photography, you're always observing the minutia. You're looking for what people are doing, what expressions are happening, what small narratives are kind of all over the place. A landscape is sort of the same, even though it has this sort of perception of being stagnant, almost still, something that you go and you wait for things to happen. There's actually always things happening. It's just a matter of finding them. So you as a street photographer looking for those narratives, I think that would translate really, really well. You have that inherent ability to react to things really sort of quickly. What would probably take more time is what narratives are catching your eye, right? So most of the time I've ever spent is outside, and so I'll get excited about seeing the small bird flying into this specific space because it feels like, oh, that's, there's serendipity in this moment. That's unique. It might take you time to realize what narratives you want to be paying attention to or you would actually be looking for. I don't think there's anything particularly, unique or inaccessible about that as compared to what you're doing.
I'm glad you're so optimistic. I'm less optimistic. Mostly because of the time it would take to climb those mountains and go to the perfect site. If I'm waiting 5 minutes at a spot, I'm like, I'm wasting my life. I got to move on. And I think that's very different for landscapes. I've only ever seen Mount Fuji from a distance via the Shinkansen speeding from Tokyo to Kyoto. For my next trip, I'll finally be up close. We're staying in the Kawaguchiko Lake District. I had the chance, if I wanted, for a serious shot at Fuji. Should I go 40, 35, or wider? What's your go-to lens for Nikon?
The two that I use the most right now, far and away, it starts with the 17 to 28 millimeter. A smaller range of that classic 16 to 35 that I think a lot of landscape and adventure photographers lean on. And I do live around that 28 millimeter a lot on that lens, especially for that storytelling side. Recently, I've added the 35 to 150 from Tamron. A beast, it's way too big, and I to be honest, I hate taking it around. It's awful. I largely got it for work purposes, but it's actually proven to be amazing, and the 35 millimeter end on it has this sort of known effect that's just a little bit dreamlike, and it actually suits my photography really well. So I've used that a lot and lived, I'll oftentimes just lock it at 35 and use it that way for the day because I don't have a dedicated 35 at this stage. I started doing this analysis realizing what lenses what focal lengths I lean on the most about a month ago, actually. I realized 35 is right at the core of so much of my work, so I've been excited to get a dedicated one for sure.
Sam's photos look amazing at 17 mil, but I won't get enough use out of a 17 to 28. How good his work looks at 35 though makes me more confident I don't need something wider. I might even prefer the storytelling of something a little tighter. What's the longest you've waited for a shot?
The best photos often follow storms. Clouds moving, there's kind of moisture in the air, there's colors, everything's either drying or soaking. So that presents a lot of, fast twitch opportunities. The storm itself is a subject. The way you're experiencing it is a subject. I was taking photos every single second of quite a big storm in Kyrgyzstan. Actually spent some time hiding in a cave, but thanks to Nikon's weather sealing, I hopped out and was kind of all over the place trying to just, soak it up, pun intended, I guess. Starts to dry out and the sky gets clear, and it became pretty evident that there was going to be good stars. That night presented quite a cool lineup between the Milky Way and the mountain. I spent, the whole night sitting there waiting for everything to line up just right, get the stack, set the intervals, check everything, do it 10 times, In that sense, the process takes 10 hours as compared to 10 minutes.
You're winning me over. You make it sound way more fun. After our chat, I took the 40mm out to shoot a nighttime cityscape. On the Z8, I could go into crop mode to get closer to a 65 if I want to. Even though these shots aren't anything amazing, it's a starting point for me. Then back into my comfort zone, Sony's 35 G Master here at night. Then I noticed it again. How close this 35 is to 40. The next morning, I took it out to test it under controlled scenarios, Z8, tripod, every lens at f16, focus to infinity or to minimum focus distance, and out of all of these lenses, Nikon's 35 1.8S is the widest. Z lenses have minimal focus breathing, its frame looks similar in size up close and at infinity, and at infinity the 35G Master looks about the same. Up close though, it has got an enormous 1.5 times crop. Even with all the autofocus motors and the 14 elements, this might be how Sony kept this fast 35 relatively small. They could even push the rear glass element on the G Master so close to the sensor because this 35 is closer to a 40, 45mm when it's up close. The TT Artisan 40, like most 40s, is a lot smaller than 35, yet its field of view is closer to Nikon's 35 1.8S than the 50 1.8S. It even gets wider the closer you focus. A 40mm should mathematically be closer to a 35 than a 50, but look, Nikon's 40 is right in the middle, half a step tighter than the TT Artisan 40 too. So this is why I felt the need to pack both 35 and 40 on Nikon to provide a distinct enough shooting experience, but the size of the 35 can put people off, especially for the last travel use case, food, and family. Want a photo of your once-in-a-lifetime meal? This salad isn't it. But I had to stand up to get the right framing on the 40, whereas I could sit down and take it casually on a 35. The most popular Japanese restaurants tend to be the most cramped. There's no way the Nikon 40, especially because it's closer to 50 than most 40s, is wide enough to get a family shot without making a scene. And that was my experience on the third and most recent Japan trip as a dad. Even as we traveled all over the country, Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, the heavier 35 1.8S was my default. The 40 stayed in the bag. The 35 is more versatile in more travel settings than the 40, and it all clicked once I chose family. My daughter's now fallen in love with Japan. Her travel dreams are the weight I'm willing to carry. If you're still split between 35 and 40, here are a couple of travel alternatives. 35 f1.4 non-S lens from Nikon. Tamron's fantastic, 20 to 40mm f2.8, but I didn't keep it because I always used it at 35 or 40 and it doesn't have internal zoom. Sam's pick of the Nikon 70 to 28 f2.8 does have internal zoom. I think that might be the pick if you want something wider. Sam, where can my viewers find you?
If they actually want to get to know me, it's going to be at Sam Bugas on YouTube. Otherwise, Instagram is SWBugas and my website's sambugas.com.
If you like 28 but want a fast 28, I reviewed the best manual focus 28 for the ZF here. If it's something tighter, my video on 85mm options is here. I'm Jack. This is Bokeh Therapy.